Hello everyone. So yeah, I'll be talking about subglacial water flow simulations on GPUs, and I guess as a upfront, we're still very much developing this model, so there's no users to be seen anywhere yet. So I will give them power as they come in. Okay, so that doesn't work. Okay, so what subglacial what? So subglacial water flow occurs at the ice bed interface. It impacts ice dynamics, that's one of the important bits, so through the boundary conditions, but it's also other interesting features, like for instance, glacier lake outburst floods are important hazard. And so here on the left you see a sketch of a glacier, and the blue lines indicate the water flows, possible water flows. And so here is a sketch of how this system may evolve during a season. So during winter there's little water, so there's a distributed flow predominantly, and then as more water is injected into the system you get channels forming, which then take over most of the discharge, and then back again in autumn. And one of the models which can simulate this is the GLADS model, which I and others developed around 2010. And it simulates both the distributed system and the channelized system. And it calculates water pressure, which is one of the inputs into which you would then use to couple it to ice flow. So here is I guess the main equation. So it's an elliptic or a parabolic partial differential equation. So phi is this hydraulic potential. If that doesn't mean anything to you, then just take water pressure. And it's a diffusion equation, and it's a nonlinear diffusion equation, as you can see there in the term in the middle. It's a reaction equation, that's those V terms, and then there's some sources. So that's the main equation, so that's the only PDE. And we also solve some ODEs. The ODEs determine how the drainage space evolves, so how quickly, say, the distributed sheet opens up or closes down. All right, so the original implementation was using finite elements in MATLAB. And I guess one of the tricks we used was because these channel equations, they are not well posed in 2D, so they're only simulated in 1D on the edges of the mesh, but the distributed system is simulated everywhere. And then you get results something like this. So you get, this is for Gorner Glacier, an alpine glacier. Blue are the channels it develops, the contours are the contours of the hydraulic potential, and color is the water pressure. Okay, so we want to have now a modern GLADS in, on Julia and in GPUs, and why? Well, we know why, but so let's go to what we want. Yeah, so we want something which is hackable. I mean, the MATLAB code was, it was actually pretty okay, I'd say, and it runs okay fast, but it's definitely showing its age. We want it to be differentiable, so we can eventually do inversions and sensitivity, and of course, we want good performance, up to probably about 4 orders of magnitude bigger domains than before, or meshes. So this is just a ticket for Julia. So now to the implementation. Now we use so before we had an unstructured grid, now we use a structured grid. Again, the channels only live on edges. So the spatial discretization is now staggered finite differences. The time discretization, we, at least for now, use just a backward Euler. The nonlinear solver is this pseudo-transient method, which is a damped relaxation method, which works really well on the GPU. At least, well, that's when it works well. It actually doesn't work so well for this model, so that's one of the reasons why it's still work in progress. And we use a GPU, CPU agnostic coding using this parallel stencil framework. And so this is like a code snippet of how one of the compute kernels would look like. So that's the kind of inner compute, which we would compute at each grid cells, which gets them mapped either on the CPU and kind of just a for loop, and then on GPU with whatever the CUDA stuff does. And so the macro at the top is the finite difference. Actually, the finite won't be able to scroll. The finite difference is sadly just off screen, but yeah, it's just the difference of phi at one grid cell versus the other. And then there's the bulk of it is this what starts with these parallel indices. So that's one of the macros from parallel stencils, which provides some, well, basically indexing functionality. And it takes a bunch of stuff, and then it calculates this flux. So so here is this nonlinear diffusion diffusivity calculated, and then the flux is calculated. Well, it's a kind of an update. So this is this pseudo-transient method, which relaxes the flux until essentially the definition, the mathematical definition of the flux equals to 0. This bit here. Yeah, and I mean there's a bunch more kernels, and you loop through them to iterate. Well, both the nonlinear iteration with this pseudo-transient method, and then the iterations over time to step this forward in time. So this is a example of some first results we're producing. So this is a synthetic setup of a ice sheet margin-like topography. So ice and water flow is from the right to the left. And at the top, you see these channels, the blue things which form. So this is a run into a steady state under steady forcing. And the arrows indicate the directions of water flow in the sheet. So you see as the water gets drawn towards the channels, so quite similar to subaerial drainage, where rivers collect water from smaller rivers from overland flow. And at the bottom you see essentially the water pressure. So the water pressure is, well, this is effective pressure, which is ice pressure minus water pressure. And yeah, the water pressure is lower in the channels, so that's why they draw in the water from the sides. Here's another example, but let's jump over that. And so doing the outlook, so we need to fix the convergence issues we have at the moment. So the plan is to use a conjugate gradient method, and we're pretty confident that that should work, and that should also run fast on the GPU. So that's definitely the next step. I want to look into resolving channels. So at the moment, they only live on these edges because the equations are ill-posed in 2D, but we can add some extra terms to make them well-posed, but then you need really high resolution to resolve those meter scale type channels. We want to couple it to our ice flow model, the fast ice model, which you may have seen a presentation about 2 days ago. And yeah, we want to work towards inversions. And yeah, hopefully with a bit of luck, we'll soon have PhD postdocs openings for working on this. And then just a side note, there's other kind of geo-related package I have, which is called Where the Water Flows. This is a simple D8 routing package here applied to a glacial setting, but it works also for subaerial settings. So if you want to route some water around your topographies, then that's where you can go and look. And yeah, with that, thank you.
Okay, then. Are there any questions? I see one over there.
Can you guess what my question will be?
No idea.
Why implicit Euler? Also, why pseudo-transient? Because pseudo-transient's one that kind of baffles me, because it's always it's like a non-adaptive line search method, and so it tends to always be slower than adapting line searches. So I'm kind of really curious about that one, but also why the backwards or the implicit Euler choice as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, the backward Euler choice is just a simple one, and there's probably good use to use adaptive time stepping eventually, and so on. In particular, if you have kind of seasonal forcings, and then you definitely want to have adaptive time steps, and probably something slightly higher order than backward Euler. But yeah, I guess I should have put that in the outlook as well. The pseudo-transient, I guess, is our go-to method in the sense that it's easy and it's well easy to implement to run well on GPUs because it's kind of a really local method, so you don't need any global reductions. But I mean, in this case, it doesn't work well, and the conjugate gradient should address the reiterations you just stated, and so we'll see how that works in the future.
Any reason to not try truss region methods or other line search methods?
I guess we could look into those as well. I hope we don't have to. I hope that conjugate gradient will just work.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. This is a long play.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
I have a question with respect to the inversion, because your main observable in that case is just the surface velocity of ice, I guess? Or do you have additional observables that you can tune your hydrology model to?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's one of the issues. The system is hard to observe. So, as you said, probably one of the best strategies is to invert kind of a coupled ice flow hydrology model, and then you can use surface velocities. But other observations which potentially useful are kind of in situ experiments, like tracer experiments or proglacial discharge measurements. Yeah, but at a large scale, probably only surface flow speed measurements from satellites are feasible.
Because for that, I mean, there's kind of a complication because you also don't know the basal friction properties at the bed of the ice, right? So you kind of have this difficulty to disentangle two parameters. It's kind of A times B multiplied with, whatever state that you have, and you can only really get the combined effect of both, right? So I don't know, if you have thoughts on that, I'd be very curious to hear them, how to disentangle that as much as possible. More data, I guess, but...
Yeah, I think one of the potential ways is if you look in time. So maybe you think that the kind of fundamental parameters in your sliding load, they might be constant over time, but then you have a seasonal cycle and you have a seasonal signal in velocity, and that seasonal signal will come from changes in the hydrology, and so then that might be one way of disentangling it. But I think it'll be difficult.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you again.